300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game. I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a Wednesday morning. Opening night last night in the NBA, but it's opening week. There's some big news out of Philadelphia with Ben Simmons. The MLB playoffs are in full swing with the NLCS and the ALCS, and then at about 8:30, 8:35, my guest, Jonathan Rifkind, joining me. Cannot wait for that. And some big-time Malkin's moments that I'm looking forward to discussing. But we have to start first in the NBA, and it starts with the defending NBA champions, the Milwaukee Bucks. We travel to the Midwest to open up the NBA's 75th anniversary. The Milwaukee Bucks played host to the Brooklyn Nets, the defending basketball champions, taking on the team that was the preseason favorite to win the NBA title potentially this season. The Bucks unveiled their championship banner for the first time in over 50 years. Oscar Robertson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar accomplished the championship for the Bucks in 1971. They received their rings, and obviously the Bucks, deservedly so, were basking in the NBA sunlight. They deserved all the attention. It was a tremendous accomplishment for them last season. And the interesting thing about sports, and we've talked about this all the time, is how things can change from one season to the next. Not in terms of which teams are going to have certain records, but as far as the actual play of specific players, right? In the NFL, we see this all the time. One season, Carson Wentz is an MVP candidate and an MVP frontrunner, and 2 years later, we look at him in a totally different perspective. He's having a difficult time just being traded out of Philly for the Colts. They almost had to beg teams to take him, right? And what happened last year, what the finals unlocked, was a different version of Giannis Antetokounmpo that we hadn't seen before. Because what last year's finals unlocked to us as NBA fans was a much more intelligent, was a much more acutely aware Giannis Antetokounmpo of what his strengths are and what he needs to do to succeed. Last year, finally, Giannis played the most intelligent type of basketball that he'd ever played in his career because he understood, I have the advantage inside almost every single time. I'm going to bully my way to the rim. I'm going to dominate the postseason and be in control. And what we saw in the finals, and especially in Game 6, perhaps one of the greatest finals performances ever. 50 points, 14 rebounds, 5 blocks, 2 assists, 17 for 19 from the free throw line in 42 minutes, was a guy completely aware of what his strengths are. He tied Bob Pettit for the most points in an NBA Finals clinching game. Bob Pettit did it in 1958. But what we raved about with Giannis was the fact that here's a guy who never shied away from the free throw line. Even though he was struggling throughout the entire season, he came right back. He continued to relentlessly attack the rim. And he wasn't always settling for the outside shot, wasn't always settling for the three-pointer. Instead, was posting you up. And even though the defense knew he was going to drive it to the rim, it didn't derail him. Didn't deter him whatsoever. And on opening night last night, what we saw is Giannis building on what he learned from last postseason. Because he comes out, drops 32 points, 14 rebounds, 7 assists, a tremendous performance, 2 blocks, 7 for 9 from the free throw line, plus 25. He was doubling down on what those strengths were from a season ago. A guy that's going to relentlessly attack the rim. And the problem that people had with him before he won the title was they almost wanted to convert him into Cade 2.0. And he said, you know what? That's not who I am. That's not my game. Where I'm at my best is when I'm attacking the rim, when I'm going for layups, when I'm rolling to the basket. And every offseason, I'll continue to work on these other aspects of the game, but that's not what makes me unique. And that was the problem that people had. And those were the only question marks about his game. And instead, from last postseason on through already the first game of this new 2021-2022 campaign, we're seeing how much Giannis has learned from that experience from last year. We're seeing him fully aware of what makes him unique. And I was extremely impressed with him and the Bucks, especially the fact that Jrue Holiday had to leave pretty early on with a concussion. They basked in the glory. They backed it up. And the one thing I'm not worried about this Bucks team led by Giannis is any form of complacency. What this guy had to go through just to get to the NBA, complacency isn't in his DNA. This is not someone who is going to rest on his laurels and be satisfied with one championship. This is an ultra competitive guy who understands that while all these other teams around him may be forming super teams and may come in with a chip on their shoulder, it's not going to be a bigger chip than his own. Growing up essentially in an impoverished community in Athens with his brothers, in like a hovel, essentially, didn't have his own room, amongst many other things. This guy's not going to get complacent. And they came out and they made a statement that the Bucks are for real once again, and it was great to see in the NBA. But on the flip side, all I could think about, and I apologize if fans don't really want to be hearing this, all I could think about was Kyrie Irving's absence last night. Because to be honest, I wasn't expecting to feel it quite as much as I did, but it was undeniable. It was extremely noticeable, Kyrie Irving's absence from the team yesterday for the Brooklyn Nets, because they lost 127-104. And there were several stretches in the game where it really even wasn't that close for the majority of the game in the second half. KD was obviously sensational, as he always is going to be. Paced the team with 32 points, over 50% shooting. That's what he does. To be honest, I thought Patty Mills played an incredible game, 21 points off the bench. I really liked that acquisition. I was hoping the Lakers could have acquired him. I know there were discussions there, but he ultimately joined the Nets. That was a huge pickup for them. But my kind of concern yesterday had more to do with James Harden, to be honest. Yes, he had 20 points. He had 8 rebounds, 8 assists. But if you look at his production in the second half, the production in the second half just wasn't quite there. He had 3 turnovers and 5 points on 1 for 3 shooting in the second half. He had 1 turnover and no shot attempts in the fourth quarter. Now, he did dish out 5 assists, so I do like that he's a facilitator. He's always been a genius with the basketball from that perspective. But no shots in the fourth quarter for James Harden. That can't be. They need him, especially if Kyrie isn't going to play or be a part of the team. They need him to also be that scorer just as much as he is a facilitator. And it was surprising to me that down the stretch, he didn't attempt any shots in the fourth quarter. That's just an uncharacteristic decision by a guy who, yes, he doesn't play. He plays unselfishly, but they need him to be a scorer. And KD needed him to chip in just as much on the scoring front as he was on the assist front. But again, I just continue to find myself almost angered and further frustrated and disappointed that Kyrie Irving isn't there. Because you do wonder, well, how has that impacted the team so far? The body language of the Nets, not that they look deflated, but they almost look frustrated that a third of our big three isn't here. That just seemed to be apparent watching this team. And especially down the stretch, you were seeing how much they were struggling offensively. Now you understand why. Kyrie Irving is one of the best closers and one of the best late game finishers in NBA history. He's a clutch player. He's an extreme offensive weapon that they didn't have, quite frankly. They just didn't have. And so I hope that Kyrie Irving was watching this game yesterday and saying to himself, okay, enough is enough. I get it. It's a personal decision. Everyone has the right and is entitled to do what's in the best interest of them. And Kyrie Irving shouldn't be forced to inject something into his body that he's not comfortable with. But at the end of the day, this team needs you. And I don't think that the Brooklyn Nets are going to be the favorites if he's not there. They're still a title contender. But I don't know if they're going to be the favorites to win the NBA, let alone coming out of the Eastern Conference. I don't know if they're going to be the favorites over the Milwaukee Bucks without Kyrie Irving. So those were kind of the big takeaways from last night's matchup. But I was overall impressed with the Bucks and especially with Giannis. He also did it defensively. He had another great block on Nick Claxton, reminded me of the two sensational blocks that he had in the NBA Finals against DeAndre Ayton. In Game 4, we remember that recovery block up by 2 with 1:15 left in Game 4, and he had a chase down block in Game 2 against on Mikal Bridges. He had another one last night against Nick Claxton, so he was sensational. The other game that took place on opening night, Golden State and the Lakers at Staples Center. Unfortunately for my Lakers, it was the second straight opening day loss at Staples Center to start an NBA campaign. That's 2 years in a row. Actually, that's really 3 years in a row every time LeBron has been on the Lakers so far. Not my favorite stat, but regardless, there were a lot of things that were expected. The style of play was a bit sloppy, especially in the first half and for large stretches of the game. And that normally reflects opening day kind of basketball games. Teams are kind of getting their first major reps in together. Obviously, you have the preseason, but it was discouraging already. Not only that the Lakers lost, but just the fact that they also lost all 6 preseason games. Not that preseason games are any indicator, but it certainly helps to have some of that confidence heading into a regular season game. They obviously didn't have that. But here's the one thing that we shouldn't be concerned about anymore. Let me start with the positives. There shouldn't be any more questions about LeBron James and his basketball mortality. I don't know what his health is going to be like throughout the course of the season. I don't know how his body will hold up in year 19. But if there were any questions about his skill set when healthy, I think that he has quelled any of those fears or doubts about his talent and his talent mortality. Because the way that the guy was playing last night, LeBron James didn't look diminished whatsoever. He was sensational last night, beginning his 19th campaign. We all remember how injuries were the main cause of derailment. In his first season with the Lakers, he pulled the groin. Last season, Solomon Hill fell on his ankle, and he was out for a substantial period of time and never fully recovered. So the version of LeBron that we saw in the postseason last year was maybe 70% of LeBron at best. A guy who couldn't attack the rim, a guy that looked slow, looked old, couldn't elevate. That wasn't the case last night. With probably the longest offseason that LeBron has had in years, he looked recovered, he looked rejuvenated, he looked strong. Dropped 34 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists. 5 assists, sorry, I gave him an extra one. 56.5% from the floor in 37 minutes. The guy looked phenomenal. Scored a game high, not only between the Warriors and the Lakers, but in the entire NBA amongst both teams combined. He was absolutely sensational. And again, this is unprecedented. This is uncharted territory. We've never seen a guy in their 19th season play this well. The only guy who comes close is not Westbrook, but Kobe, the jersey right behind me. He's the only one that can hold a candle. He had a fantastic 19th season before he ruptured his Achilles. 26.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists. That was a sensational 19th year. But even that may not be what LeBron's able to do this year. Guys like Kareem didn't do that. Kareem averaged 14 points a game his 19th season. Karl Malone was good, but averaged about 13 and 9 with 9 rebounds, 13 points. Still impressive, but the expectations of him and both of those guys weren't the same as LeBron. And even John Stockton, who averaged 11 points and 8 assists along with a couple steals in his 19th season. Very impressive for the age. Still big-time contributors on a team. But you look at LeBron, and he still looked like the best player out on the floor. It was remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable. So that was a really positive sign for the Lakers because no one was really sure how he was going to play. And then the other good sign was seeing Anthony Davis looking huge. Dropped 33 and 11, 2 blocks. He was back to being his dominant self. Again, even though they lost as a team, the sight of LeBron and AD back to near full strength was something that I think is really encouraging. Really encouraging sign. Obviously, it was disappointment. It was disappointing that Westbrook struggled 4 of 13 in his Lakers debut. I'm sure there were a lot of emotions going for him. I'm sure he had a lot of family members in attendance, or at least who'd been reaching out to him about this game. He's been envisioning and dreaming about this moment for his entire life playing for the purple and gold. It's your opening debut. It's the opening night of the season. There's big expectations. So I'm going to give him a pass for last night, even though he didn't play extremely well. But I kind of like the complexion of this team. But the main difference was the shooting. The Warriors just shot it a lot better. And the big reason was Jordan Poole. This was a kid who just burst onto the scene towards the end of the season and was heading in the right direction with all kinds of great momentum, just a budding star in this Warriors organization who led the team last night with 21 points, had 9 points in the third quarter, went on a little 3-point barrage, scoring 3 3-pointers from deep distances, 27 feet, 28 feet. He was fantastic. And you look at what he did last year. This was a guy who averaged 12 points a game last year, but in the final 9 games of the season, averaged 18. In the final 5 games of the season last year, he exploded for 22, including a 38-point outing. So Jordan Poole is the real deal. I really like this kid. He unfortunately tweaked his ankle a little bit in the middle of the second half last night, so we didn't see him quite as much in the fourth quarter. But when you got Jordan Poole dropping 21 and you got Bielitsa of all guys, for crying out loud, scoring, looking like an all-star, 15 points, 11 rebounds. I think he even chimed in a couple assists as well, too. Had 4 assists. And Steph Curry didn't play well by his standards. Still recorded a 20-point triple-double, even though he considered that to be trash. So I said to start this season, before the season even started, that I liked Golden State as a legitimate playoff team, not to make the play-in, to be an actual playoff team. I've always liked this team. I even thought last year they'd have made it substantially farther. I think that this year they're capable of reaching the Western Conference Finals. I truly believe that. And whether you have a 70% Klay Thompson, whatever percentage of Klay Thompson you add into this mix, I really like it. Steve Kerr is a great coach. They have a great leader in Curry. And I just think the pieces around them. Again, Jordan Poole, Toscano, Anderson. James Wiseman isn't even back and playing. Andrew Wiggins can have his moments. So I'm really bullish about this Warriors team. I always have been. But for me, the big takeaway was it was more of an encouraging sign to see LeBron D to full strength, back to playing healthy, and back to looking like themselves. That was the biggest concern for me heading into this new season. They've quashed all those concerns. So, tremendous, tremendous night in the NBA. I was still extremely excited that the NBA is back. And I'm just looking forward to the rest of this opening week. It should be a lot of fun. Unfortunately, not every story in the NBA has been a fun one. The Philadelphia 76ers, this situation with Ben Simmons just continues to erode every single day and just deteriorates almost on an hourly basis. Yesterday was the ultimate flare-up. Ben Simmons was kicked out of practice yesterday, was suspended one game, by at least one game for now by the organization. And apparently Doc Rivers was the one who kicked him out because he asked Ben Simmons to join a defensive drill. Ben Simmons said no. Rivers asked him again, will you participate in this defensive drill? Ben Simmons said no a second time. So Doc Rivers said, hell with you. We're kicking you out. And Simmons dropped his basketball and left. And we know already the type of feelings that the players have for him. Joel Embiid ripped him to shreds yesterday. Basically said, quote, at this point, I don't care about that man. Honestly, he does whatever he wants. Since he's been back, nothing has really changed. And we don't get paid to come out here and try to babysit somebody. So the 76ers have come out and have apparently said that their asking price hasn't changed for Ben Simmons. And I've been on record saying I've thought for weeks on end, if not longer, that Ben Simmons has to be traded and that it's a detriment to the team to keep him around. I just thought that the environment for him, I'm not sure why they're still hanging on. I mean, I understand why they're hanging on to him, but at this point, I thought they should have gotten rid of him for a while because really only there in body. He's not there in spirit. His attitude's not there. And he's there for one purpose, and that is to collect a check and not get fined. So let me first say this. The way that Ben Simmons is handling this situation is extremely immature. It's unprofessional. He's acting like a petulant and whiny child. And that's not how a disgruntled star should behave. So at this point, I don't take any issue in Joel Embiid coming out saying, the hell with this guy. I have no problem with Doc Rivers feeling extremely frustrated and saying the hell with you in practice. My issue isn't with those actions. That's never been my issue. And so I understand that Doc Rivers and the organization, to a certain degree, were trying to kind of ingratiate Ben Simmons back within the organization. Perhaps at least enough, then ship him off when he's feeling a little bit more upbeat, potentially. Maybe it's a facade. Regardless, my problem is that if you know you have this situation where a toxic environment clearly either exists or will exist the second you put someone in that situation like Ben Simmons, well, then just avoid that situation altogether. I don't think that the way that they were handling him coming back into the facility and into this practice, regardless of whether or not they knew it or not that he was coming, to me was the improper way of handling the situation. If you've got a child who struggles with anger management and you enter him into a psychiatric facility, the parents pay exorbitant amounts of money for him to be in special therapy sessions, and the kid says either I don't want to go to the therapy sessions, or while in the therapy sessions is forced to engage and participate, or they ask him to participate in different exercises. If you're the therapist, the one thing you're not going to do is intentionally say triggering remarks to infuriate and enrage the kid even more. That wouldn't be a prudent decision. What would probably happen is they'd understand this is a delicate situation. The parents want this kid to be here. How can I maximize this time and not waste it so we can try and help this kid out? Now, there might be tough discussions that take place that might expose some different underlying issues. But at the end of the day, you're not going to make kind of incendiary remarks that are going to trigger and enrage the kid, because that just wouldn't be productive. And to me, when I see this situation again with Ben Simmons, it's not that I have a problem with Doc Rivers saying, get the hell out of here if you're not going to play. And I don't necessarily have a problem with, again, the players feeling the way that they do. My problem stems from the fact that if you know Ben Simmons doesn't want to be there, Daryl Morey, and you're the organization, don't put that onus on Doc Rivers or on the other teammates to force them into a situation where they have to call him out, where they have to say, hey, we need you to get out of here if you're not going to participate, when you knew that was going to happen all along. You knew he didn't want to be there. And though you didn't technically force him to come, you basically presented a situation where he was extremely incentivized to show up simply to collect a check. He did it. And then the minute he gets on to the facilities, Doc Rivers decided it was a smart thing to do in practice to single him out to participate in a drill. He said no. You ask him again, he says no. So was that surprising to anyone? It wasn't surprising to me. So to me, this was a completely avoidable situation. And I think that the 76ers, and especially Daryl Morey, first of all, they've mishandled this situation, I think. And they also need to treat it more like the way the Brooklyn Nets have treated the Kyrie Irving situation, which is a paid exemption. We're paying you, but we don't want you anywhere near this team. Now, obviously, it's a little bit different. The players may not feel as much hostility or animus towards Kyrie as perhaps the 76ers players now feel towards Ben Simmons. But the idea is the same. If you're not going to be a part of this team, then we're not going to treat you like you're a part of this team. And I just thought that approach was not the right approach at all. Daryl Morey, I thought, made a huge blunder, and he should have traded him a while ago. And unfortunately for Daryl Morey, reality, I think, is starting to set in. Hey, I'm not going to win this trade. Whatever this future trade is, I'm not going to win this trade. And you just got to accept it. It sucks. It's not a deal. Doc Rivers is a good person. The 76ers, I like their personnel. It's not right. It's not fair. They're justified to feel the way that they are. And Ben Simmons is in the wrong as well. No one's right here. Ben Simmons is not acting maturely at all. And it's fair for his name to be besmirched. It's fair for his name to be ridiculed the way that it is for how he's acting. But I also don't think that it's an intelligent decision to exacerbate a situation even more and make it an even more unsafe situation. So, Joel Embiid referenced, we don't get paid to babysit. Well, what do you do with a baby that's crying and being a nuisance all the time? You put a pacifier on it and you put it back in the crib. That's what you do. So I just don't really like the way that Daryl handling the situation. Overall, I blame him. I don't blame Doc. Overall, I blame Daryl Morey for the situation. They gotta do something with this. Okay. Couple minutes, just really quick on the MLB, and then Jonathan Rifkind joining me in a couple minutes. So just have to give some quick thoughts off my chest really quickly about the MLB playoffs. So the NLCS was last night. I'll start with that, then I'll switch to the ALCS. Dodgers and the Braves. Dodgers came back to beat the Braves 6-5 in Game 3. They trailed 5-2 in the bottom of the 8th inning. And I'll be honest, once the Dodgers jumped out to the 2-0 lead, I was thinking to myself, all right, here we go. Let's not blow this one again. Please, let's not blow this one again. And I nearly had to witness another blown game, if not for the heroics of Cody Bellinger, who's been fantastic postseason, delivered a huge 3-run homer in the bottom of the 8th. And he's been doing this all postseason. This is a guy who struggled mightily in the regular season, batted 165 in the regular season. Now he's averaging like over 280. He obviously hit the huge home run last night. He delivered the winning against the Giants, Game 5 of the NLCS. And the other piece of it that we don't talk about is even against the St. Louis Cardinals in the wild card game, he was the guy that drew a 2-out walk to get on base to set up the Chris Taylor home run. He then stole to second base, which Taylor actually admitted was kind of a big relief for him. So he was kind of the unsung hero in that game as well. He's been fantastic all postseason. And I just think that the job that Mookie Betts, Corey Seager, and Bellinger, the three of them, have just been fantastic. Beth has certainly had some moments. Taylor has had some big moments. But those three guys have been tremendous. And it's a huge win to stay alive in the series. Now, the only downside is Freddie Freeman and his bat finally woke up. He was 3 for 4 yesterday. And Jock Peterson continues to torch his former team. He's been batting like over 300 and batted 500 yesterday. He's been fantastic. Duvall was 2 for 5 yesterday. So this is a good Braves team. But I do think that massive, massive win for the Dodgers at the very least to avoid a 3-0 deficit. And now transitioning to the ALCS, you have the Astros and the Red Sox all knotted up at 2 apiece. And listen, we all despise the Astros, but one thing is for certain, they've got talent. Unfortunately, you have to admit they've got tons of talent with Correa and Altuve and Bregman and Gurriel, Kyle Tucker, Brantley. This team's loaded from top to bottom. They're extremely loaded. And the fact that they were able to pour in 7 runs on 2 outs in the top of the ninth. Correa was at 7. They had a man over at first. I forget who was over first, but there were 2 outs in the top of the ninth that started that rally. And then Castro hit the base hit that brought in at least 1, if not 2. So I don't like the Astros, but they're extremely talented. And to be honest, I don't really love the Red Sox or Alex Cora either. But what they've been doing is miraculous this year as well. I have to give them a lot of credit. He's a tremendous skipper. He's one of the best, if not the best, at finding ways to elevate a little bit lesser tier talent to motivate these players in a way that they hadn't been motivated before. The job that Kike Hernandez has been doing as a former Dodger, he's hit 5 home runs, batting 500 this postseason for the Red Sox. He's been sensational. Rafael Devers, Verdugo, of course, a former Dodger, and JD Martinez. Devers and Martinez also hitting grand slams. Kyle Schwarber is hitting grand slams. He's got 3 home runs. This Red Sox team has been a revelation and has been a big surprise, and the series isn't over for sure. It's a good one, with the exception of one game, Game 1, which was a 1-run game. Every other game has been just extremely high offensive numbers. So this is a tremendous series, and I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of it. So it's been a wildly entertaining series so far. Okay, now it's my pleasure to bring on Jonathan Rifkind onto the show. There are a lot of different the titles I can give for him, but sports broadcaster, host of Believe in the Pac-12. He's a Pac-12 insider. He knows NFL and NBA as well. So with that, it's my pleasure to bring on to the show Johnny Rifkind. Johnny, how's it going? Good morning.
Good morning, Jonah. Yeah, going well. Those were a lot of accolades. I think that just like a guy who thinks he knows about sports would have done just fine, but I'll take what you gave me.
And well, listen, I think we may argue about a couple things, so it's better to soften your emotions now. Let me first
see you today, so it's a good thing that that's happening.
That's true. You might see me today. You might. Let's start first with the opening night, the NBA yesterday, the Bucks and the Nets. I thought for me, Johnny, what was impressive to me is it seems like Giannis fully sunk in. He's fully digested what he's learned from last postseason, which is I know who I am. I play extremely well around the basket, not having to settle to try and convert myself into a KD 2.0. I thought he's just tremendous now because he's fully aware of who he is as a basketball player. What did you think of Giannis's performance last night and the Bucks altogether?
Yeah, I think that you're right about that, but I think taking it a step further here, it's not just that he knows who he is, he knows what it takes now, right? They won a championship. They won a championship in a pretty competitive NBA season where the East was top heavy. The West had, 5 or 6 teams that were all, teeter-tottering around the 2 to 6 seed area, and then we could talk about the top if we want to with the Nuggets and the Jazz and the Suns. But the biggest thing to me is that he now knows what it takes to win. And he saw a team in Brooklyn that is depleted without Kyrie Irving that I don't know if they got that much better in the offseason outside of that. They're a great team. They're a team that, if Kyrie's back, is my favorite to win the East. But you could see the confidence just resonating throughout the offense, right? Chris Middleton looked really good. His perimeter defense somehow got even better. I think the Team USA experience with him and Drew Holiday was a very positive one. Drew Holiday going out, disappointment, but the team has shown the depth around him, right? DiVincenzo, Grayson Allen, who they signed for 2 years. I think that this team has an identity. Their identity is credible because of a championship, and now they know what it takes to win. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see how really the rest of the rest of the league now adjusts, right? Because this is a team in Milwaukee that's sort of a little bit different than the other NBA champions that we've seen. Giannis is not a 3-point star. He's not Kevin Durant, right? He's he plays old school style basketball, Magic Johnson style, not necessarily with passing, but he's not looking to shoot threes. He's not looking to shoot 15-footer fadeaway turnaround jumper. Sometimes he does. We all groan when he does. That's not what he's looking to do. But he has pieces around him that are representative of today's NBA. So you've got a little bit of continuity here between old school basketball and the new age, the new era of basketball. And I don't think that the rest of the league knows really what to do with it now that we've seen it, not only in action, but actually win a national championship.
So let's switch to the Lakers. Obviously, the big three debuted officially yesterday with LeBron, AD, and Westbrook. Westbrook struggled, of course. And listen, my take on it is, sure, is it the most perfect and imperfect fit, but I do think that we ought to give them some time to try and gel, try and mesh. What were your just first impressions from seeing opening night and how Russ fit in with this squad yesterday?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. They can't play Russ and Westbrook together. They just can't. No, wow, Russ West. They can't play Russ and Rondo together. It's a detriment to the offense. There's no continuity. Russ doesn't seem interested in playing any defense, which is pretty on par with what we've seen out of him the last 5 or so years. This team is going to be fine. They're a postseason team. There's going to be a lot of. I mean, I woke up this morning, same as you did, Jonah, and I saw overreactions all over the place. Both, oh, this is the one loss the Lakers are going to have, and oh, the Lakers are going to win 10 games, both from Laker fans. There seems to be a little bit of internal strife right now within Los Angeles after last night, and everybody needs to calm down and just let the NBA season sort of play out right now, because we have no idea. We didn't think the Suns were going to be what they were last year, right? We didn't think the Hawks were going to be what they were. So why are we sitting here making these rash judgments? Well, yes, because it's fun, because we need content to talk about, but it's not indicative of how this is probably going to go. So, Russell Westbrook is a fantastic NBA player. He has been his entire life. He will be for the rest of his life. He's going to figure it out the same way the rest of this team is going to figure it out. LeBron had 36 points last night, right? And AD had 33. That's a great sign. All they need now is for Russell Westbrook not to have a minus 25, not to have 4 turnovers, to have maybe, 15 points and 10 assists, and not shoot the ball. Maybe Westbrook doesn't shoot the ball 14 times anymore. Maybe he shoots the ball 9 times. And maybe most of them are layups. And maybe he goes for assists now, because guess what? He's really good at that too. They could have Rondo and they could have Westbrook both averaging over 7 assists per game. And that does not exclude LeBron, who is also a fantastic passer. I think it's just going to be some time for this team to build an identity. We talk about how the Bucks have an identity, the Lakers don't. And LeBron is great at forming that identity. And that's what we're going to see take place over the next, couple of weeks, maybe a month or so.
It'll be interesting. It'll certainly be interesting. Again, it's just opening night, so I don't want to overreact too much. It is an imperfect fit, but as a Lakers fan, I'm willing to give it time. Okay, so let's transition to Ben Simmons. I know you and I talked a lot off air about this last night.
Haunted my dreams.
So we reached the same conclusion, which is Daryl Morey should have traded him. Where you and I disagree is how you thought Doc Rivers handled the practice yesterday. How do you think Doc Rivers handled that situation yesterday, and where do you think the 76ers should go from here?
I think that it was handled correctly. To that point in time, there was nothing the Sixers could do from stopping Ben Simmons from practicing with them, right? Like, he is a contracted worker on this team. And as a contracted worker for a job for this organization, he is obligated to do certain things. If he wanted to get paid, he had to choose to show up. They didn't say you have to show up or that's it in the NBA. No, they said you just won't get paid. He said, okay, I want to get paid. I'm going to show up. The problem is that he chose to act a certain way while he did it. Did the team know that he was going to act a certain way? Probably. Did they have a reason, though, to send him home before a tangible act took place? They did not. And so now, which is what I think sort of the point that we left on last night, Jonah, is that now everybody can be happy, right? The Sixers don't want him in practice. The Sixers don't want him on the court. Well, now he gave him a reason not to be. Ben Simmons doesn't want to be on the team. He doesn't want to be on the court. Well, now he has a reason to not be. He had a contract that obligated him to be there. They had a commitment to him to coach him. Doc Rivers is a coach. Doc Rivers is not a therapist. Doc Rivers is not a parent. Doc Rivers is a coach. He is the boss of Ben Simmons. He asked Ben Simmons to do his job, and Ben Simmons refused. So Ben Simmons got penalized for it, as any of us would in our places of work, right? Nobody was forcing Ben Simmons to be there, but he chose to act a certain way. Could it have been avoided if he didn't show up? But if you're the Sixers, you have to abide by the NBA rules and do what every other team is, which is saying if you don't show up to practice, you don't show up to training camp, you're not going to get paid. It has to be consistent with all 30 teams. It has to be consistent with all 445 players in the NBA. Ben Simmons cannot be an exception just because he's a whiny little baby. So because of that, I have no problem with what happened. I have no problem with how it was handled. I have a problem with how Ben Simmons himself is quite obviously trying to destroy the chemistry of this team. And it's a really bad look for the young guys coming into the league, because this is a guy who is supposed to be taken seriously, supposed to be a leader. When he was at LSU, he was awesome. If I'm a rookie, I'm laughing at this guy now. Like, that's really the person that is supposed to be an example for me. Like, I don't think anybody in the league is looking at the Sixers, like any players looking at the Sixers and saying, oh, the Sixers did this. I think they're all looking at Ben Simmons saying, what is this guy doing? What is, like, all of us would love the privilege to be in his position. He's taking it for granted, and now he can't because he's not there anymore. That's
so
how I
if
feel
you're
about what happened.
so if you're the 76ers now, where do you go from here? How much longer do you just kind of give him an indefinite suspension? What do you do right now for the 76ers in your opinion?
I know they suspended him for a game. Yeah, I mean, unless conduct detriment to the team is only supposed to be a game-by-game suspension, he has to keep piling up these egregious actions to get suspended for longer. I don't know. Like, you can't just get fired without due process or just cause. You can't just get suspended from a job or put on administration leave unless there's a real reason. So I don't know. It may just be that conduct detriment to the team. Like, there's a chart, and in that chart there's a bullet that says 1 game suspension for first offense, 5 games, whatever it is. I don't know if any of us really know, right? Like, that's not something that is disclosed to the public or to the media, and so we sort of just have to roll with the punches on this one. I would love to see him traded. I would have loved to woken up this morning to notification that says Daryl Morey finally trades Ben Simmons. Didn't happen. I would love to see that, maybe tonight during the game, Daryl Morey's on the court shaking hands with their team that they're playing, saying congratulations. And Simmons walks over and puts on a different jersey, and then
That'd be epic.
Throw a couple of elbows at him for being a little,
That would be legendary. Absolutely legendary. If Daryl Morey was to shake hands with the general manager of the team that he was trading him to on the spot, that'd be unbelievable.
Over, go get the physical in the back, and he's good to go. He's throwing a jersey, get the jersey stamped, and he's done.
All right. Okay. No, sorry. Go ahead.
That's it. I would love to see him traded as soon as possible, just as you would.
Okay. So now let's totally pivot to college football for a second. You and I are both going to the Oregon UCLA football game this weekend. What I enjoyed watching the Pac-12 to start this year was the narrative shift. After Oregon beat Ohio State, seemed like the narrative shifted a little bit on the spotlight of the Pac-12. UCLA's emergence kind of again brought some newfound life and vigor into this conference that was kind of struggling to capture the attention of the entire college football playoff just committee. Obviously, both of these teams, more so Oregon, still in a position, but a little bit of that shine has come off. But what do you think of the Pac-12's chances of still getting a team in the college football playoff? It seems right now Oregon is the only opportunity, only candidate. But overall, as a conference, if Oregon continues to win out, how do you like the college football, the Pac-12's chances of having a team represent?
Well, the first committee rankings come out next week. Right now, Ohio State is ranked ahead of Oregon. That should give all of us an idea of how the rest of the nation sees the Pac-12 because Oregon has digressed since they played Ohio State. First of all, to answer your question short, yes, Oregon is absolutely the only chance at all ever right now in for our life in this year for the Pac-12 to have a team in the college football playoff. Um, you know, ASU already lost earlier this season in the BYU. They lost to Utah last week after giving up 28 straight points in the second half. They're out. UCLA is losing to Fresno State automatically, unless Georgia loses in the SEC's bye week where they play all the FCS opponents. Unless they lose that game, there is zero chance that UCLA can make it, even if they beat Oregon and win out. Like I don't think that there's faith anymore, Jonah. I think that narrative that you and I, trust me, I was very ecstatic and energetic. This was the most energized I've been in the early weeks of a Pac-12 season that I have been in so long. LSU lost to UCLA. Oregon beats Ohio State. Colorado almost beat Texas A&M, who went on to beat Alabama. And Colorado has not put up they scored once since then. It's ridiculous. So I was riding that narrative right with you. So it's a little disappointing for me to see, but it's not surprising. Oregon's offense isn't that good. And when I say that, I mean their quarterback isn't that good. But they refuse to play the star freshman. I completely agree with the whys. We don't have to get into it because that's a very long conversation. Um, and I think that they know that they're not going to win a national championship with this team. Unfortunately, I think that mindset has migrated into playing down to their opponents, which gives UCLA the prime opportunity this week to win. UCLA is a fantastic team. This is Chip Kelly's best opportunity to finally get back in his own old program. DTR is fantastic. They're going to have Jake Phillips, the wide receiver, back, who wasn't with them in Washington last week. Oregon's defense is miles better. But if their offense can't score, it won't matter because UCLA has explosivity that will reign in the end of the day if Oregon can't compete point for point with them. So I literally think UCLA could just win this thing 28, I don't know, 28-15, 28-18, something, or 21, sorry, 21-15, 21-18. I think it's going to be low scoring. I don't think we're going to see a ton of points because that's not how Oregon's offense is right now. And their defense is good enough to stop UCLA a consistent amount, but I don't know if they're going to be able to stop them enough to where Oregon's offense will supersede the scoring that UCLA has put up on the board.
Well, there's no question that everyone would love to see UCLA beat Oregon. That I think is a given.
Jonah, there are going to be just as many Oregon fans at the Rose. Let me tell you, you know that's true too.
Okay, so Cincinnati, a team that actually right now, perhaps if the first college football playoff rankings were to be released, right now they're sitting at number 2. I'm not sure where they would fall in the college football playoff committee's perspective. But right now, they're obviously in a great position. This is the best position that a non-Power 5 school has ever had. What do you think about their chances? Let's just say, hypothetically, Johnny, I was looking at top 5 in the AP poll. Again, who knows if that's going to be the way that it shakes out in the college football playoff, their first release. But right now, Georgia's 1, Cincinnati's 2, Oklahoma's 3, Ohio State's 4, or Alabama's 4, and Ohio State's number 5. Let's just say, hypothetically, that all those teams went out and the only loss that Georgia suffers is to Alabama in the SEC championship game. Do you see a situation in which Cincinnati at this point can still make it if they win out, given those other circumstances?
Oh, it would be a catastrophe if they didn't, Jonah. Look, we're heading towards a playoff expansion. We are. Unfortunately, this conversation is going to be obsolete in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, especially with the conference realignment. Sounds like Conference USA is losing 6 teams to the AAC after this, or in 2023. So there's that stipulation to think about, especially the University of Texas San Antonio being ranked now in the top 25. They're going to move to the AAC after Conference USA. So all these realignments, we're headed towards a playoff expansion. I don't think any of us are in the dark or naive about that. So it sucks to sit here and say that there is a massive chance that Cincinnati is going to get screwed out of this year's college football playoff. Yes, we evaluate mid-major success based on previous year's history. That's all that's how we have to do it. Michigan has not been very good. If Michigan went out in the Big Ten this year, they would be in the college football playoff because they're Michigan. But Cincinnati has to have 3-4 consecutive really good seasons to prove that they're a consistent and good program that can compete with the Power 5 programs before we even give them a nod. I disagree with it. Now, Cincinnati, Houston, BYU are all moving into the Big 12 or into the the SEC. No, the Big 12, right? Yeah, they're all moving to the Big 12. So that will alleviate some of that perspective when that happens in 2025. Until we get there, these mid majors are kind of screwed, man, and it sucks. I love these mid majors. So the what if of your question, I don't think so. I think if Georgia's only losses to Alabama, I think if Alabama's loss to A&M is really the only one. They had an insane. I don't know if you watched that game, Jonah, but they scored 35 straight points at the end of it.
Yep.
It was incredible. I found myself rooting for Alabama to come back because of how crazily they were playing. That didn't sit well with me at all. So I don't think that Cincinnati would get in if Georgia's only loss was to Alabama in the SEC championship. I don't think they would get in if Ohio State's only losses to Oregon. Oklahoma's probably going to win out the Big 12 and get there and give up 75 points in the first game of the college football playoff, and it is what it is. And it sucks for Cincinnati. It really does, but it's just where we are. So they're hoping Ohio State loses another one, or they're hoping that Georgia wins out and Alabama's a 2-loss team. Or Oklahoma. If Oklahoma's a 1-loss team and they could lose to Oklahoma State, who's really, really good and beat Texas last week, then I think that there's a chance. I think a 1-loss Big 12 team would not get in over an undefeated Cincinnati. So I think that's probably their best chance.
Okay, final question for you, and I only want I just want you to give me the winner. All right. So MLB playoffs, Red Sox, Astros. I know it's your Red Sox. They're tied 2-2. Wins that series in your mind?
The Red Sox win. You said you didn't want anything else. The Red
and
Sox
Dodgers win. And Braves?
The Dodgers win.
Good man. Good man. Johnny, thank you so much for joining me. I'll probably see you pretty soon. Not sure, but hopefully. And make sure to check Donnie out. He also does play-by-play for Point Loma and Cal State San Marcos, host of Believe in the Pac-12. Johnny, thank you so much for joining me. Have a great rest of your morning.
You too, Jonah. Today.
All right. That's Johnny Rifkind. Happy to have him on. I think ultimately we reached the same conclusion about Ben Simmons. It was just more the specifics of that practice that perhaps we disagreed on with the way that it was handled. But regardless, final topic of the day, of the show, my favorite topic every single time, Malkin's moments. I have a couple great ones. First of all, I got to give a shout out to Kenley Jansen yesterday for some redemption after giving up the game-winning hit in Game 2 to Rosario. He bounced back tonight, striking outside in the bottom of the ninth to secure the Game 3 win for the Dodgers. Happy just as a redemption moment for Kenley Jansen. For the Houston Astros, they rattled off 7 runs in the top of the ninth inning with 2 outs against the Boston Red Sox to ultimately win 9-2. 2 game heading into the top of the ninth, 2 outs, and Castro laced one into right, and that just kind of opened up the floodgates. And what's impressive is that the 7-run inning, I looked this up, is tied for the most runs scored in the ninth inning of a game in Major League history. And they all came with 2 outs. It's unbelievable. And in fact, the Astros have scored 36 runs with 2 outs this postseason, which according to ESPN Stats and Information is the most 2-out runs ever in a team's first 8 games of the postseason. Big shout out to, unfortunately, I have to give credit to the Houston Astros in that respect. In the NHL, Eriksson Ek netted a hat trick for the Minnesota Wild. They came back in stunning fashion against the Winnipeg Jets. Really impressive, actually. They scored the tying goal. He scored not only the tying goal in the final minute of regulation, he also scored the game-winning goal in overtime as the Wilds won 6-5 in overtime over the Jets. It's kind of exciting that the NHL is back. The Tampa Bay Lightning have won back-to-back Stanley Cups. They're off to a slightly slower start, 2-2 to start the year, but nonetheless, what's impressive, too, about this Minnesota Wilds team and going up against the Winnipeg Jets, this was their first matchup between these two teams in 653 days. which is kind of unfathomable that these two teams haven't played in that amount of time, nearly 2 years. Impressive. And finally, I got to stick with a hometown hero. Cody Bellinger delivers the 3-run home run in the bottom of the 8th to tie Game 3 of the NLCS versus the Braves 5-5. And I don't think people realize that the ball that he hit the home run on, it was a 96-mile-an-hour fastball way above the strike zone. It was a fastball that was climbing up the ladder, and Bellinger, on a bad swing decision, still decided to swing it, laced the barrel of the bat, just was fantastic on the hit, and it was impressive. And what's more impressive is apparently the pitch crossed the plate about 4.12 feet off the ground. No one since at least 2008 has homered on such a pitch at that speed during the postseason, and Bellinger, more importantly, hadn't homered on a pitch out of the strike zone this entire season. And that was the first time he did, and he connected with it. And obviously, I've talked about some of the big at-bats he's had this postseason. Last night, of course, Game 5, the game-winning hit against the Giants. He had other big hits in that series and getting base against the St. Louis Cardinals in the wildcard game. So big shout out to him. And the Dodgers became the first team down 2-0 in a series to come back from at least 3 runs down after the 5th inning. So if you're the Atlanta Braves, watch out. We're coming. We're coming. Just like last season, down 3-1, down 2-0. Coming back. Hopefully the Dodgers can take tonight's game. That'll do it for us here at Morning Joe. Thank you so much for joining me every single Monday and Wednesday morning. 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin. Follow me on Twitter at Jonah Malkin or at morning_Joe_JMalk97 on Instagram and Jonah Malkin on TikTok. Thank you so much for joining me. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.